Ashley was always a lively and curious child. From a young age, her parents noticed that she had a special connection with nature, especially with animals. She could spend hours watching the animals in their neighborhood, the playful rabbits hopping in the grass, the birds flying from tree to tree, and the squirrels darting up the tall trees with their twitching tails. Ashley loved observing these animals, trying to learn about them and understand what they needed. Her parents, Bailey and Daniel, supported Ashley's love for animals. They knew it was more than just a phase, it was a strong bond she had with the world around her. They often saw her talking softly to the birds in their backyard, mixing whispers and giggles as if she understood them. She would help ladybugs find their way back to trees or gently reach out to neighborhood cats, encouraging them to come closer with her soft voice. There was something almost magical about Ashley's ability to communicate with animals, as if they were drawn to her kindness and sincerity. Her love for animals went beyond mere curiosity. It was a deep-seated passion that compelled her to ensure the creatures in her yard were comfortable, safe, and well-fed. Every day, she would fill the bird feeders hanging from the trees with fresh birdseed, ensuring that the feathered visitors had plenty to eat. She would gather acorns from the ground and scatter them around for the squirrels, who would eagerly munch on the treats. On occasion, she would even leave small pieces of cheese out for the stray cats that wandered through, hoping to give them a little extra nourishment. This ritual was one she performed with unwavering devotion, always making sure that no creature went hungry. But it wasn't just the animals in her yard that captured her attention. Ashley had a keen eye for new friends, whether they were the chipmunks darting across the street or the butterflies fluttering past her in the garden. She believed that every creature, no matter how small or fleeting, deserved love and care. Her heart was big enough to encompass them all, and this love for the world around her grew stronger with each passing day. One particularly cold winter afternoon, when the first snow of the season blanketed the ground, Ashley's excitement was palpable. She had been eagerly awaiting this day, anticipating the moment she could run outside and feel the soft powder crunch beneath her boots. As soon as she saw the white blanket covering the earth, she rushed to the door, her heart racing with anticipation. The world outside had transformed into a winter wonderland. The trees were heavy with snow, their branches bending under the weight. The ground was covered in a thick layer of fresh snow that sparkled like diamonds in the weak afternoon sun. Ashley could hardly contain her joy as she prepared to explore this magical landscape. She dashed into her room to put on her warmest clothes. The first item she grabbed was her red scarf, lovingly knitted by her grandmother. It was soft and comforting, making her feel safe. Next, she slipped into her thick, cozy puffer jacket, followed by her mittens and boots. Once she was bundled up, she opened the door to the cold air and ran outside, laughing as she spun in circles, her arms outstretched like a bird ready to take flight. Her cheeks turned rosy from the chill, but she didn't care. She was in her element, surrounded by the beauty of the winter landscape. Ashley's laughter echoed through the yard as she danced in the snow, making snow angels and throwing snowballs into the air, watching them explode into a burst of white as they landed. It was a peaceful afternoon, with only the sound of her laughter and the crunching of the snow beneath her boots breaking the stillness. She loved the quiet, the way the world seemed to slow down when the snow fell. It made her feel as though she were part of something bigger, something timeless. As she wandered further into the yard, something caught her eye near the edge of the fence, just beyond where the snow had settled into perfect smoothness. She noticed a trail of small, delicate footprints. At first, she thought it was just another animal, perhaps a rabbit or a squirrel, but something about the tracks felt different. They were too tiny, too fragile. Crouching down, her breath coming out in little puffs of steam, she examined the tracks more closely. There were small indentations in the snow, almost like tiny paws, but they didn't seem quite right. Intrigued, Ashley followed the trail, her heart racing with curiosity. What kind of creature could have made these delicate prints? She felt a sense of adventure bubbling inside her, eager to uncover the mystery that lay just beyond her yard. The world was full of surprises, and she was determined to discover them all. The tracks were shallow, and they didn't lead anywhere obvious. They seemed to disappear into the white expanse of snow. Ashley's heart skipped a beat as she followed the trail, her curiosity driving her forward. She moved carefully, stepping lightly on the snow as she tried not to disturb the footprints. As she got closer to the edge of the yard, she saw something that made her blood run cold. There, nestled in the snow, were tiny creatures, perhaps a half-dozen of them, huddled together for warmth. They were shivering, their small bodies trembling from the cold. Their fur was patchy, and their eyes were tightly shut. Ashley's heart clenched as she realized that the creatures were barely alive. They were so small, so fragile, and they needed help immediately. "Oh no," Ashley whispered to herself, her voice filled with panic. "What happened to you?" Without thinking, she gently scooped them up one by one, cradling them carefully in her hands. They were so light, so delicate. She wrapped them in her scarf, hoping the warmth of the fabric would help them. But as she looked down at them, she realized just how helpless they were. They were so tiny, no bigger than the palm of her hand, and they were shivering uncontrollably. Ashley's chest tightened with fear. The snow was falling heavily now, and there was no way these little creatures could survive out in the cold. They needed warmth, care, and protection, and Ashley knew she had to do something fast. Ashley moved quickly, her mind racing as she carried the tiny creatures toward the house. The cold barely registered against her skin. All she could think about was getting them inside where it was warm. The door was in sight, and she felt the weight of the fragile animals in her hands. Her heart pounded as she climbed the steps, her breath coming in sharp, anxious gasps. She had no idea what these creatures were or what they needed, but she couldn't bear the thought of leaving them outside to die in the snow. Once inside, she hurried to her room, careful not to jostle the little animals. Her hands trembled as she gently placed them on her bed, arranging them as carefully as possible. She wrapped them in her softest blanket, the one she used when feeling sad, hoping it would provide comfort. Feeling powerless in the face of their fragility, she refused to give up on them. Ashley sat beside them for hours, her eyes never leaving the tiny creatures as she waited for them to stir. She whispered softly, assuring them they were safe and that she would take care of them. She just wanted them to survive. She didn't know what else to do. After a while, her mother, Bailey, came upstairs to check on her. She had noticed how quiet Ashley had been and felt a pang of concern. When she opened the door to Ashley's room, she found her sitting by the bed, her face pale with worry, her eyes fixed on the tiny creatures. Bailey's heart softened as she approached her daughter, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Sweetie," Bailey said softly, her voice full of compassion, "what's going on?" Ashley's voice trembled as she explained. Her words rushed and filled with emotion. "I found them outside, Mom. They were alone in the snow, and I couldn't leave them there. They're so small, and I don't know what to do. They won't eat, and they're so cold." Ashley's voice broke as she spoke, and tears welled up in her eyes. She felt helpless, unsure if she could save them. Bailey knelt down beside her, wrapping her arms around her daughter in an embrace. She knew how deeply Ashley cared for the animals, and her heart ached seeing her so distressed. "You've done everything you can, sweetie," Bailey said gently. "You've brought them inside, kept them warm, and tried to care for them. But maybe it's time to get some help." Ashley looked up at her mother, her tear-filled eyes full of uncertainty. "But what if they don't make it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We'll make sure they get the care they need," Bailey reassured her. "I'll call the Wildlife Rescue Center. They know exactly what to do." Ashley nodded, wiping her eyes. Although she wasn't ready to let the tiny creatures go, she understood that her mom was right. Sometimes, even when you care deeply, it's essential to ask for help when things are beyond your control. The rescue center took the animals in, providing them with the care and warmth they needed to survive. It was a relief for Ashley to know they were in good hands, but it also reminded her that helping others isn't always about fixing everything yourself. It's about recognizing when something is beyond your ability and knowing when to seek assistance. That winter, Ashley learned a valuable lesson about compassion and responsibility. She realized she couldn't save every creature, but she understood that every effort counts. This experience deepened her connection to animals and strengthened her commitment to helping them. Every life, no matter how small, deserved care and attention. As time went on, Ashley became more involved in volunteer work at the local animal shelter, doing everything she could to assist animals in need. Her love for animals had always been strong, but her experience with the tiny creatures in the snow transformed her compassion into action. She now understood that even in the darkest times, there was always something she could do to make a difference in the lives of those who needed help.